Today is Wednesday, May 23rd, 2018. I'd like to call this evening's City Council meeting to order. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have the roll call.
Councilmember Bosch?
Here.
Councilmember Stimmel?
Here.
Councilmember Williams?
Present.
Councilmember Valenzuela?
Here.
Councilmember Sturman?
Present.
Mayor Thornton?
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there are no requests for any items to be removed, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have council and staff reports. I have a few items this evening I'd like to share. First, I would like to recognize one of our police officers. Officer Alex Martinez was hired by the La Center Police Department on May 1st of 2017, and I would like to congratulate him on successfully completing his 12-month probationary period. He has received extraordinary reviews from his trainers and is considered an asset to our community. So again, I want to congratulate Officer Martinez, and I hope he has a long career here in La Center. And then I'd also like to bring the council's attention to our newest hire. I'd like to welcome Officer Alec Langlois. He started at the La Center Police Department on May 16th. Officer Langlois will begin his field office training on May 31st. And we look forward to having him as part of our police department team and part of our community. So,
Mr. Mayor, is he a
congratulations to them
transfer
both.
in, or does he have to go to the academy, or?
He actually, he has been through the academy, and he didn't really transfer in, but it was more of a lateral from, I believe, Longview, yeah.
Okay.
But he hadn't finished his field training, so he'll be doing that here in La Center. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, did I get that right, Danny? Okay, great. A few other items here. Just want to remind everybody that my next town hall meeting will be Wednesday, or 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, June 6th. The meetings are held at the Public Works Building, and everybody is welcome. So I see a lot of people there. The roundabout construction on 4th and Pacific is about to start. So May 29th, the construction actually will start on the roundabout. I think you've probably already seen the office trailer that's been set on 4th Street. The signboards are up notifying people that there will be a detour. The City Council had a work session on May 3rd where our city engineer and the contractors pretty much outlined what the staging of that project will be and what the detours were going to be. And that's been finalized, and it is as was stated in that meeting. So basically two stages, and we will get those drawings and information up on the website, and we'll push it out on social media and get it out as many ways as we can. But be advised that it's going to be starting on the 29th, May 29th, and 4th Street will be closed for right-hand turn off of Pacific. Also, just want to mention that the Holly Park Spray Park will begin being used on June 15th, and I believe that's the last day of school. I also want to mention that the concerts in the park, the first concert we will have is going to be June 30th. I believe we'll have a total of 5 concerts this year, again, like last year. And I just really want to thank Mona and Rick Dean for stepping up and taking care of that for the city. They do a great job. They're great concerts. It's really a wonderful event that the City of La Center is able to provide. And then I just also want to say that Monday, May 28th is Memorial Day. The city offices will be closed. Memorial Day is a day of remembering all the men and women who have died while serving our country. So we do have a representative here this evening from the American Legion here in La Center, and he'll be talking about the event that they'll be holding on Monday at the La Center Cemetery. But I hope everybody takes time at some point in the weekend to remember all the men and women that have sacrificed their lives for our country. That's all I have this evening. Next thing on the agenda is the attorney's report. Mr. Cairns?
I don't have a whole lot as an example of how slowly the gears of justice can grind. We're still in the process of getting Court of Appeals approval for an expedited review of the Growth Board's compliance order. So the Court of Appeals Commissioner has scheduled oral argument on an unopposed motion for expedited review. And they've invited the 15 parties involved in this, for the various law firms to send their junior lawyers to provide them opportunity to practice. So anyhow, Steve Hornstein he's planning to show up. Sarah Mack and I are both out of town. It's June 6th is the date for this hearing. But, the motions have been submitted. It's unopposed. Even the Growth Board has agreed to it. So it'll happen June 5th or June 6th. And I assume there's no alternative but to grant the motion. And then it'll give us an opportunity to say it should also be consolidated with the underlying appeal of the Growth Board's order on the merits. So, how many times have I been talking about this in city council meetings? It's been 6 months, right? Saying
Expedited.
This is going to happen. This is an expedited review. So,
It's been a year since we started this process. Yep.
Yeah. And on the Land Use Petition Act appeal, the loop appeal of the Riverside Estates, the scheduling hearing before the Superior Court judge, it's been set, and we the parties have continued it to the next month. Right now it's set for June 15th. I'm hoping that before then, the Riverside Estates developer will have figured out an alternative that will satisfy the petitioners here, as long as it's consistent with the city intersection standards. We might have a proposed settlement with Dennis Nutbrock and his neighbors, and I assume it will require a minor revision to Riverside Estates if all the stars align on this. But we'll see.
Okay, pretty good.
And that's it.
Any questions for the city attorney? Okay, moving on then. Next are council member comments. Councilmember Wolf?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have one item. At the conclusion of our last regular city council meeting, we held a work session regarding the proposed code for cottage housing. And in that work session, 2 or 3 items came up from the council members who've asked the Planning Commission to look at the code a little more thoroughly, especially with regard to accessibility, or meaning wheelchair accessibility. So having been a recent member of the Planning Commission, guess who got to get that assignment? So I'll be working with the Planning Commission here for a short while, coming up with the information that the other council members are looking for. Okay. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Thank you for stepping up and doing that. Councilmember Stimmel?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one thing. In reading through tonight's packet, I kind of had a thought that with the new leash law, maybe we could look into a dog park. I know these have been really popular. Bottled Power gives or allows the use of some of their right-of-way underneath transmission lines. There's one in East Vancouver. There's one by Ellen Davis Park. And they actually get quite a bit of traffic. So I just want to make you aware. I want to bring this up to the next, within the next Parks and Trails Committee meeting.
Sure.
It's not identified as anything we're going to work on anytime soon, but I thought I'd start a conversation, especially with tonight's legislation.
Very good. Yeah.
That's all.
That's great. Thank you. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Williams?
I have nothing tonight, Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Valenzuela.
Report on the Port District meeting today at 3. Actually, it started at 2:50. They did their annual meeting, and it lasted all of 6 minutes.
Wow.
We should be so efficient. Then they had their regular meeting, and of course, everything's hot and heavy in Ridgefield. So there's all kinds of important things that have happened. They're having ribbon cuttings almost every week over there because of the development that's happening over there. So just to let you guys know, if you want to look at their website, you can go to something every single week, I think. There's some kind of a ribbon cutting, so. But the important one for some of our people is on June 2nd will be the big paddle. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, it's an interpretive paddle up and down their river system there. And it's well worth your time. If it's a nice day, by all means, you should try to attend. Would still like to see a bunch of people take off from our little landing here. I noticed that it was being used today.
Yes.
They had
used
some
more all the
kayakers
time.
that were launching. It's a little underwater, but
Yes.
it's an easier launch that way. Also, during their meeting, they reported that they are leasing out their new PVC pipe that they put in the ground. So they're getting $1.30 a lineal foot, and they're leasing for the black fiber. Somebody's going to put Wave, it's called, is one of the firms, and they've leased space in the conduit that they laid during our sewer construction. So at least something's happening on
Yeah.
that
No, it's,
on that system. So it's a nice positive step. So, and they may also end up being able to charge an excise tax. I don't know what, I'm not sure I understand that part of it yet, but it's $1.30 a lineal foot, and they're going to put in enough additional lines that basically the port won't have to put those in. They're going to put them in for them. So when they do put the black fiber in, they'll have access already in the ground for the tubes. They're going to lay 3 tubes in there. They're only going to use one. The other 2 belong to the port.
very good. Thank you. Councilmember Servany.
Nothing tonight.
Very good. Well, then, we'll move on to staff reports. There was one staff report included in the packets, prepared by Paul Lewis, our financial consultant. It's a pretty straightforward report, so I did not ask him to come here this evening to present it. The council members all received a copy of it. I don't know if you can pull that up, Danny, or not, but we can. It's available on the website as well. So if you have any questions on that, you can either call me or contact me, and I'd be happy to get the answers from you, or reach out to Paul Lewis, but pretty straightforward.
It looked like in most areas we were right on target.
Yeah, it's that-
in the
yeah,
ballpark.
Looks really
Right.
good, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So next, citizens' public comment. So if anybody would like to address the council, please step up to the podium and give us your name and address, and if you'd please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Al Fella, 152 West 15th Street. As most of you are aware, the 28th of May is Memorial Day. The Center American Legion Post 189 will have a ceremony out at the cemetery here just past the high school at 11:30 on the 28th of May. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nelda Perryman, 824 East Pioneer Loop, the center. Mayor, council, and citizens. I would like to speak about having a beer garden at this year's Our Days Festival. At our last meeting on Monday, Mayor, you were given contact information to find out all things you need to know about how to get this put through. Did you do that?
As a matter of fact, I have. I'm working on it, yes.
Good, because time is of the essence. Before you know it, it's going to be here, and as the treasurer of Our Days Festival, we need to plan ahead.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think it's a good idea. The rest of my committee thinks it's a good idea, and I think it's going to generate some income for future festivals. And I like beer.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
Joe Woodage, P.O. Box 1, Mayor, council members, citizens. We still have the elephant in the living room here. Hear nothing about Sarvis and Suzanne. Brought a picture of the meeting that they had when the juncture was completed, when Jeff got his award and was recognized for the great work he had done on that. I hear nothing. I hear nothing from the people for whom he worked. What in the world? It just confounds me that we work this city the way we do. We have a council member who got caught in a lie, a bald-faced lie, and then a deception of resignation, and that council member is still here. Where's the integrity in this organization? Thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Burtwell, 34608 Northwest 11th Avenue. I didn't write anything down, but the question that I have is about land use and zoning, and I know that it's a big issue as how land is used, and one of the points of it that I am curious about is what businesses can be appropriately zoned in the city, and what animals can be housed in the city. I kind of went through the documents that the city has available, and it addresses dogs, but there's a lot of other critters out there that people have, and I'm just curious as to whether they're still appropriate and what quantity of individual animals are appropriate in a city. And I would imagine that looking at how other cities have addressed this would be possibly how we might approach it as well. I know that was a ramble, but
No.
those are my concerns.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other comments this evening? Okay, well then we'll move on down to new business. We have two items under new business this evening. The first one is going to address amendments to the La Center Municipal Code, 8.25, and fireworks and pyrotechnic devices, and 9.55 firework regulations. So essentially what the council's going to do this evening is just have a discussion. There was some information included in your packets, staff report, along with the current existing code. And then also Councilmember Wolf, and actually I attended a few of the meetings as well. Several months ago, the Clark County started a stakeholders group that addressed this very issue. And the primary purpose of that stakeholder group was to come to some kind of consensus as to what would be a good practice, I guess, for both the sales of fireworks as well as the use of fireworks. And I think the goal is to try to get all the different jurisdictions to have a similar code, so we didn't have competing codes in different parts of the county with different cities and what have you. And I know I read this morning where the city of Battleground just adopted their new ordinance last evening, and I think that the city of Ridgefield is looking at their ordinance as well as the county. City of Vancouver has prohibited the use of fireworks, so they do not allow fireworks at all anymore. But as you get further out into the county, people seem to have a little bit more of an appetite, if you will, for fireworks. So this evening, I just would like to open it up to a city council discussion. I know Councilmember Balf is pretty well versed on what happened with the stakeholder meetings. We have the ordinance, but what I'm looking for is just to get some kind of a consensus from the council as to how we want to proceed, if we do want to look at adopting a code similar to what some of the other jurisdictions are adopting. And I'll turn it over to the council for your discussion. I don't know, Dan, if you have anything to add at this point, or should we just wait till they...
No, then the staff report is in here that shows, I think, where things are headed at the county level in these other cities. So It's up to you. This is a pure policy decision. State law, it limits the purchase and sale from June 28th until July 4th, different hours, and also July 5th, different hours. And then they can be discharged from June 28th to July 5th with a variety of hours. If we want to adopt regulations more restrictive, we can do so, or ban them. But if it's more restrictive, we have to have a 1-year delay in effective date. So if whatever you decide to do, I'll listen carefully, and if it's different than what's in the staff report, we'll prepare a draft ordinance for a hearing and your consideration at the next meeting, June 13th, I think, so that it gets adopted, if at all, at least a year before it really needs to come into play. That's all.
Thank you.
Couple of comments. Yeah, the stakeholder meetings, the county stakeholder meetings were interesting in the sense that I don't know if it brought everyone together. There were still different factions that were still kind of holding pretty firm to their opinions. So I think it was the county council members that came up with, I thought, would be a compromise of all the different opinions that they heard. Fire danger, fire hazards is the strongest concern that people expressed. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at Battleground's website, but they had a very detailed survey of their citizens, and the fire hazard was the biggest issue that came up there. The center citizens who responded to the poll on social media, fire hazard was also the biggest concern. Noise then came in second, almost universally, or within the county, not in every case, but in most cases. If we were to go to the proposed program, I don't know if it's going to reduce fire hazard or not. I guess maybe in the sense of reduced number of days might help reduce the risk of fire. To go to 2 days of use would most likely reduce complaints on noise. I mean, probably the same amount of fireworks are going to be used, but if the noise is confined to 2 days as opposed to the 6 days that we have right now, that might result in some reduction on that. One thing that I noticed in looking at the proposed legislation, the number of use days is defined as July 1st through the 4th. And assuming this were to be implemented, that would be in 2019, July 1st through 4th. Next year is a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And one of the comments that came up from the nonprofits and from the fireworks manufacturers and distributors is that weekend days seem to be the busiest days of their sales. So that kind of concerns me. If there's some truth to that, a Monday through Thursday in 2019 might not be good for the Lions Club and the booth that's run. I think that's something we need to get more information on. I'd be real careful about that one. And, but I don't have a problem with, personally I don't have a problem with reducing the use days and the sale days, but it's the way the weekend falls. I don't want to do anything that will hurt the nonprofit in the center.
So are you saying we should extend the sale time, but not the...
I think we probably should. Even if we made it 5 days, at some point on the calendar, you're going to have Monday through Friday, and you're not going to have a weekend. So I'm not sure how we can address that. But I think we need to think about that more thoroughly, about not having weekend days available for sale.
Okay.
That's my thoughts.
Maybe what you would say is commence Saturday morning before the 4th of July. Well, of
Yes.
course, if the 4th
Yes.
fell on a Saturday, then that would kind of make a short week, or it could be a very long week. But I understand what you're saying about the sales or the clubs. It's just how we're going to enforce people. Once they have them, they're going to want to light them.
I'd like to hear from the Lions Club if their sales records reflect the same thing, that weekend days are better sales days than weekdays are.
Our best days are usually 2 days before the 4th, and then whatever we got left on the 5th. But
Really? Regardless of the day of the week?
Yeah, regardless of the days of the week.
Okay.
But that was prior to the construction going on and, you know, because we're going to be down by the water treatment plant this year.
Okay.
That's one proposed site.
Okay. Thank you.
Doug, was there any talk about the impact that not having sales on the 5th would have?
There was none in that respect.
Is there any reason why in the desire to have the county, Richfield Battleground, the center more similar, they didn't move towards the state regulation?
Well, that's what we have right now. We pretty much follow the current state RCW for the sale and use of fireworks, as did, I think, Ridgefield and Battleground. The county actually had two different ordinances for sections of the county.
Right.
So that created a problem for the county, and once that discussion started, then they included the different cities as well. But the theory behind this is to limit the number of days for sales, but not limit it so much that the nonprofits aren't able to be able to sell to their clientele. I mean, it's a tradition. Ridgefield has one nonprofit organization that sells fireworks in Ridgefield, as does La Center. So now there's, the county, of course, has many distribution
Right.
outlets. But, yeah, it's basically to start consolidating this so it's not, you know, so widely. If you lessen the number of days that it's sold, that may lessen the number of days that people start setting them off earlier, too.
Sure.
And it's really about use, I think, more than the sales. Yeah.
When we do it on the 5th, it's usually whatever we have in stock, and sometimes we don't even do it on the 5th, just because we've sold everything. So the 5th would not be that big a deal for us, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. And if people knew that, they would take that in consideration.
Well, a lot of it's just word of mouth and people driving by and going, oh, they're still open.
Yeah.
And that's where the customers on the 5th come from. Because we're only open for a short time on the 5th. Because we have to have the product back up north that day.
If you sell them on the 5th, you can't let them off on the 4th.
Save it for the next year.
So, yeah, again, Battleground did adopt this ordinance last night. They adopted the scheduling anyway, 4 days of sales and 2 days of use.
Didn't they have a clause in there about giving some authority to the fire marshal?
Yep,
In
they did.
extreme conditions?
Yeah. Yeah,
Getting
that
some
was another part of their ordinance.
Some what to the fire marshal?
Authority to put a ban on discharge if we have extremely dry climate conditions. But that's been at what level historically? What level of authority could declare that? Was it county level only?
I don't know that I have the answer to that. Battleground they adopted their ordinance, and it did specify that the fire marshal was able to make that call. I'm not exactly, I think in the council level is which, yeah, I mean, that's really, it would come before council. It would be an emergency situation, basically.
Because I think in Battleground, the article in the newspaper said that, I think there were 3 council members who voted against the proposal, and that was the big issue, as to who would have the authority to make that call. It would be elected officials or a non-elected official.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sure they
That's why
said fire marshal because that's the person that would most likely have the most quality feedback from, from the various agencies. And that's usually what happens when a mayor or a council, I mean, they may not have access to all the critical data, where obviously the fire marshal would. So either way, you could put something in there that, the mayor or council, if that's a hang-up. From the perspective of fire behavior, obviously, limiting the days limits a lot of the workload for the fire department. for the police departments. And consistency makes a lot of sense too, having a consistent policy throughout the county. And you know that there's going to be people that always work outside the system. And the cops and the fire marshals and the firefighters will be traveling up and down the county regardless, because they're going to have to go to the incidents that do happen. There was always a very, very dramatic upturn in number of calls. I mean, every single 4th of July, especially living on the east side many years that I did as a firefighter and fire chief, the conditions are much more constrictive than they are over here. But always, it was, 50, 60, 100 calls more per day that the fireworks were being used. And lots of times it was serious, very, very serious damage being done. So I would suggest that we consider, following whatever the county
Guidelines.
municipals decide to do. I think we should do that.
And to your point about the fire marshal, the city wouldn't have to delegate that authority to the fire marshal. I mean, we could leave it at the council level for a decision. The issue would be then, of course, we would go to the fire marshal or the Clark County fire rescue, fire chief. I mean, we would get guidance from, of course, the different agencies that are.
That would work.
Yeah,
We-
right, but ultimately, the authority, or
I think
would
once
be the council and
once
mayor.
it's extreme fire hazard has been declared, I mean, that's a countywide declaration. Once that's declared, then the mayor should contact the council as to whether we want to follow that declaration or not. I know with the railroad, once that declaration happens, it changes how we operate our equipment. So we have to pay attention to that carefully.
Could you come up with some appropriate language? I would think the attorney would have to come up with some appropriate
Under
language. that
state
would-
law, I mean, this isn't like the dog poop ordinance we're going to see later. State law anticipates this is more criminal than anything, and it vests the state patrol chief with primary authority to enforce the fireworks laws. So I think, on the ground, who enforces it? It's our police department.
Right, yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Okay.
So is that a consensus that we're going to,
I mean, we're not going to really make any decisions here this evening, but we can write the language in such a way that the council would act on the guidance of the fire marshal or appropriate agencies.
I'm in favor of that.
I might say that when you word it, the mayor would poll the council rather than call for a meeting. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't know that we could really do that.
We have to come in for a meeting?
If you're going to take council action,
Okay, well, that's right,
Do it in the
there's
meeting.
action,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah,
Okay, thank you.
it could be a special meeting. It's not that tough to do,
Yeah.
but it has to be a regular meeting, or a special meeting.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the,
well, the only other thought on that there is it's some language where the mayor could talk with our fire chief. Because he has he has a fire marshal. I'm just saying, so that it would still be in the area of a fire department authorization or something, and just, I'm okay with the mayor having the authority, not necessarily having a council meeting, if he consults the appropriate authorities.
And
If
that
it's
would
a
be
state
to
issue-
limit the days at which the discharge can actually happen, depending upon the circumstances each year? Is that how you would structure this?
No, I would just go with
Or it
the
could be zero.
ordinance. I would just go with these days here unless there's a serious hazard.
And so that authority to narrow it under those circumstances strikes me as an administrative function, so it's appropriate to delegate that to, you could certainly delegate that to the mayor or to the fire chief or whomever. Once you set the sideboards, only these 2 days unless circumstances warrant a reduction. Sounds that,
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think, we have the basic document in front of us, and then any little language tweaks that we need to have based on what the comments of the council have been.
yeah. It is kind of cumbersome to convene a city council meeting to do this, and it's not necessary. It's not really legislative action. I mean, you delegate a lot of things to your city experts and consultants and department heads to do things.
So are you saying we should, at the declaration of extreme fire hazard, that the mayor would have the authority to reduce the number of days
Yeah. That would certainly be.
without council intervention.
If we make no changes at all, that would stand? Or do we need to clarify, would we need to clarify that?
Let me see, is that in the, somewhere else in the current code? I don't know that it's already in the code. I mean, it doesn't really talk about narrowing it, but it certainly seems warranted. So that would be, what's before you in the staff report proposes amendments to two sections of the code, one dealing with sales, the other deal with discharge. And this would be further augmenting that discharge. So I'll come up with some language. And what I might do is kind of, I'll send it out to you by email, see how it sounds, if it does what you're shooting for, and then I'll put it in a draft that'll be before you for consideration with an ordinance in June 13th. Does that sound okay?
I like your point about convening the council. That's difficult, especially around a holiday.
Yeah.
That's true.
Mayor, this might be something for the public comment that we would elicit, but I'd kind of like to see historically how often July 4th is within a extreme fire hazard season. How likely is that, in other words?
3 years ago.
Yeah, it has happened. I mean, yeah, it has happened,
I mean, it's probably every year in Yakima, but I'm just curious.
It happens rarely on this side. It
How
happens
likely
very
it would
rarely
be.
on this side of the mountain.
Yeah.
But it does happen.
Yeah, it seems like only a couple of times since I've been down here.
I think twice in the last 20 years or something, I would think, is for what I remember.
Well, last year it rained all the way through June, but
Yeah.
that might be something if staff could look into. I wouldn't mind seeing that. I don't know if the
How many
public.
times has that, the number of times it's actually been?
Some way of determining the likelihood of it being canceled.
Send that
Okay.
question to the weather guy.
Very good.
Just one of the last comment on that, I know what the most frequent comment, besides the fire and the noise, it's the animals. You know, the animals, people are always worried about their animals because animals just freak out when there's fireworks going on for days at a time and hiding under the beds and, you know, they can't get away from the extreme noises. So that's one other, I think, one good valid reason for us to restrict the number of days.
Okay.
So while I've got you here, so the code language is in the staff report. How about it change to something like the shooting or discharge and display of consumer fireworks is prohibited except during the following days and times each year. And this is the new part. Unless an extreme fire hazard declaration has been made by the local fire authority, in which case the mayor may further limit the days and times of discharge.
There you go.
How's that? Okay. All right, there you go. It'll look like that in the ordinance that comes before you for the next meeting.
Okay. Very good.
It's the fastest I've ever seen an attorney turn around a message.
I'll have to think about this further, now that you mention
No,
that.
no,
Do a substantial amount of research.
That was really good.
Final
You'll
touches.
expedite it and get it done next year.
Say something.
Good thing you reminded
They'll
me.
expedite us and we'll have it here in 6 months.
Okay, so we'll have this on the agenda for our next city council meeting, first meeting in June. It'll also be a public hearing as well, so it'll be an opportunity for public comment as well. Anything else regarding the fireworks code? Okay, thank you, council. So the other item under new business is amendments to the Center Municipal Code, 6.10, and it pertains to animals. So this evening, we're going to talk about adopting. The city does not currently have a leash law for dogs. It has been brought in front of the city council a number of times where people have requested that the city consider adopting a leash law. The current ordinance that we have is silent on that matter. The language is more along the lines of that owners of pets must keep their pets under control at all times. I think this, adopting a leash law would make that a little bit more restrictive for people that have pets, that they have to have them on a leash if they're out walking them or what have you. So, again, because of the number of times it's been brought to the council's attention, it has been brought up at a couple of my mayor's town halls as well, where people would like to see the city adopt this ordinance. And again, I would just like to have the council have some discussion on that this evening, make sure that we want to move forward with that type of an ordinance, and if so, we can get it scheduled on a next city council meeting.
Let's do it.
Before you, I think in the packet contains this draft code language. There are a couple things to understand as you think about this, and a couple issues that you need to consider. Once you adopt a regulation like this that prohibits a certain kind of activity, when it comes to these sorts of activities, my general recommendation is you not criminalize it, that it seems appropriate to be a civil matter, not a criminal matter.
Okay.
And a number of you, Liz has been through the revision of the civil enforcement chapter of the code. And the question, when you come up with a regulation like this, is, we don't want to have, the stormtroopers going through the community, arresting people, and tasing people for not picking up dog poop. And, of course, we don't want that. And it never turns out that way. I think we've had, in my time here, had one code enforcement matter that went to hearing. The objective of civil enforcement is compliance. And it starts with, telephone contact. I don't know if you're aware of this, but your house is out of compliance. It's considered a nuisance because you have junk cars in the yard or something like that. So that it starts easy, and then if you don't get a response, then you write, the city will write the letter saying, please be advised, the following conditions constitute a nuisance, violate the following sections of the code, please bring it into compliance by such and such a date, or we'll be forced to take it to the next level. So that's how civil enforcement works. In this case, this is a pretty ephemeral sort of violation, and it's not a property type nuisance, so it doesn't really lend itself to letter writing unless there is a real chronic offender out there. But instead, the leash laws, and I threw in the dog poop ordinance as well, because it's kind of goes hand in hand, so to speak. The way it works is, if you've got this on the books, I do not anticipate that we're going to see the police out there writing tickets. What I anticipate is city employees, including the police, are free to approach people and talk to them when they see a violation. Public education is what happens. Right now, you're seeing the city of the center transitioning from a largely rural community into a more urbanized city. And so the time is probably ripe. Time is now to do this kind of thing, make that transition, and you have to kind of change people's thinking, because, hey, I moved to the country for a reason. If I wanted to live in the city, I would have moved here. Well, hello, this is a city. Even though it has kind of a rural quality to it, it's a city, and so this is what happens in cities. And so the police and public officials and public works people can tell people, hey, your dog's not on a leash. The council just adopted a new ordinance. You've got to have your dog on a leash, and here's a copy of it, or something like that, or it could be cited. I don't anticipate that many, maybe none, no citations would be issues. Plus, also, you have to understand that the biggest enforcer of this will be other dog owners. Anyone who's got their dog on a leash, you can bet that if they see someone whose dog's not on a leash, they're going to tell them about it. Or they're not picking up the dog poop, they're going to tell them about it. Hey, council just adopted a regulation, you can't do this anymore, you got to pick it up. And so that's how it should work. And that's why I don't have a whole lot of, real teeth in this thing. A $50 fine is below what we normally charge for these, for, a finding of guilt if we go to a hearing before the municipal court judge on a dog poop violation. I can't really I can't envision a situation where I recommend we go to the mat on a dog poop violation unless there's someone who's like totally recalcitrant out there, in which case, okay, we'll do it. But, it could happen. That's how it should work, and that's why it's kind of structured the way it is. Also, in the world of civil enforcement, it's usually very hard to get the police to get totally enthusiastic about it. They have this huge criminal code they have to understand and memorize, and they enforce, and it's pretty clear and objective. When someone's speeding, you know it because they've measured it. But, how much under control is a dog? It's kind of fuzzy. The civil enforcement stuff, it makes police officers skin itch. And so usually you don't get a lot of, ticket writing by the police officers for civil infractions. But they're out there, they're the eyes on the street, they can go talk to people, and that's how that works. It's on the books, they always like to have it on the books so they can go and talk to people and say, this is the law, and this is what it means. So that's why it's set up this way, and I'd invite your comments, because this also, I think you want it on the agenda with an ordinance for adoption at the next meeting.
Yeah, I would like to see it on the next item we have. We have so many things on the agenda, we might have to move forward one meeting, but definitely in June.
Yeah, so we're getting down to brass tacks on this.
Yeah.
So I kind of need your input, your kind of feelings and response for changes to this. And I haven't gotten Chief Denny's response to this yet. I know he's going to be super not enthusiastic about it, but, this happens. It's part of every city. I can tell you how things work in Portland. And, they've got a whole bureaucracy of code enforcement agents out there and Parks and Recs people that write tickets on this all the time. So that's kind of an extreme example how these things work. We're not there yet, and I don't think the police chief wants us to get there, but his...
I concur with your professorial dissertation, and I think that we should use that philosophy. The places that I've been, the code violations guys, it's a terrible job to be a codes violation officer, and you're only getting people upset with you.
Nobody wants to talk to you.
Right, so, if a nice police officer represents himself properly, usually that's all it takes. Anybody really represents themselves properly and doesn't come off as the heavy, usually you get pretty good compliance. So. And we don't need to go to court over this stuff. It's, tens of thousands of dollars you go to court over. It doesn't make any sense to do it.
I stand ready to do it, but I don't really advise it.
Well, I think it looks great. I would support it. I'd like to see it enforced. I know my son, when he was, I think, 4, got bit right in the stomach in our front yard. There's kids running around constantly. There's kids that walk to and from school. There's parks everywhere. Obviously, most people in town probably have female Labradors, but every now and then there's somebody with something aggressive. If it saves one kid from getting bit, it's worth enforcing a law we're going to have on the books. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I can think of three incidents that come to mind. Of course, the most recent one was just 3 or 4 weeks ago at our city council meeting when Sharon Brandstetter spoke to us about her situation with her dog. I went over to visit her a couple of weeks ago, and I saw the dog, and I saw the gashes where the veterinarian had done the stitches, and she used the word maul in that meeting, and I think that was a good word. That was kind of gruesome for me to look at. Fortunately, the dog will be okay. If we don't, I hate to use the word tighten things up, but it's really what it is. We will continue to get more of these reports, and I think even if we do have a stricter leash law, it's not going to stop every incident, but I think that it will send a message to the dog owners out there, and I think we need to go through with this. I have a question for Dan. In the code.
The existing code?
Yeah, the existing code, 6.10.120. There's a line on here, a couple lines. It says the owner of any dog which bites any person, so on and so forth,
Which definition?
shall be liable for damages.
So this is the definition section,
Okay.
1.020, you say?
120,
Oh,
6.10.
stand by.
lines 3 and 4.
Okay.
It talks about dogs biting people. It doesn't talk about dogs biting other dogs. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but with that last incident, when a large dog mauled a small dog, would the owner of the large dog be exempt from any damages because it's not specific in here?
Two different things. Damages, you sue someone. Someone bites your dog, and you sue them. Anyone bites your kid, you sue them. That's how it works. And that's aside from the code. It helps if the activity or the dog at the time was in violation of the code, but basically, there's tort liability
Okay.
for those kinds of things.
Okay, so you don't see a need to read this?
The thing is that the draft that's in the staff report, it needs to be integrated with the existing code. So like, there's an extensive definitions section in the existing animal ordinances. So those defined terms will get plugged in there where appropriate. And it makes sense that given that what gave rise to this is, dog bite dog, to amend that section as well, to throw that in there. That seems perfectly appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, do we have a section in our code that says dog licenses are required?
Now, this is another touchy subject that we have avoided over the years. But I think it's the county regulates dog licensing. And I think actually, let me just check.
Well, we have them here, because I pay
I
them.
believe that
I think,
there is
Use your dog
a
license.
licensing requirement. We generally don't enforce that. It's a county thing, but, it's in there.
Well, I mean, we do have it, it's,
Yeah.
because I was going to say, if it isn't mentioned, maybe we should mention it.
Well, it's in
This
there,
section.
I mean, the licensing requirements are in here.
Okay, as long as,
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't see him in this example for tonight.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, I was thinking it was, because I see the sign go up on the reader board that dog licenses are due.
Yeah. What we've been avoiding is cat licensing. That's when people come forward and once in a while say, cats are out of control.
They are.
And so I just say, talk to the mayor about that.
That's me.
Keep it down, have cat licenses.
So you're satisfied that the language is
I'm fine.
adequate for
Yeah,
the
I'm
dog
fine.
licensing?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
As long as it says it's needed, yeah.
okay.
okay, good.
So Councilmember Stimmel, you said you wanted to talk a little bit also about dog run. So what were your thoughts there?
I'd like to see at least a small dog park, something conducive to letting dogs off of leashes, fenced-in area. I mean, they're kind of self-policed as an alternative. I don't know, I'd kind of like to see what the public has to say. It was just an idea. Other places are doing this, and they get a lot of folks going out there and letting their dogs run around.
Didn't we have, weren't we looking at using that city lot up diagonal from Bucky's, that lot we own up there, fencing that? Seems like 2 or 3 years ago, but I don't think any of you guys were on the council then. Maybe you were.
Yeah, no, it's come up several times, having a dog park or dog run. I mean, the issue is available property and where do we actually have that? And it's pretty limited. Our parks are so heavily utilized right now, our existing parks, we've really never really thought it'd be appropriate to allocate space.
And the Ridgefield Park is big.
Yeah,
You know, I've taken my dog over there and turned her loose. So.
right.
But that one up here, I think we talked about using that little lot. We use it for storage of buildings,
Right.
materials, pipe and dirt and things like that. But I don't know, that's kind of small.
It's pretty tiny, yeah, for this purpose. But that is the issue for the center, is where would we have that? What would be available to have that kind of a park?
One suggestion, because it's not a park yet, it could be a park, and that's that strip in Heritage Loop. If it was maintained properly, that'd be a great place to run dogs there where all the grass gets mowed every year. It's a block long, and it'd be, it could be utilized for a park. We've never claimed it to be a park because it's a water runoff, but it wouldn't take as much effort. We could probably hire the prisoners to come in there and clean it all up really, really good, and that might be one use of that property that would be functional, and at the same time, we could add that to our parks, in our facilities plan. We've got to have X amount of acreage, and that could be a included in the acreage for a dog park.
It's a stormwater facility?
It's a stormwater, it's a runoff from the housing projects, but it's in the middle, and it's all treed, and it's grass, and it would meet 9/10 of the requirements.
Okay, so it's not a critical area, wetland type thing?
I don't think it is. We'll have to check it out, but I
Yeah,
don't
no,
think
that-
it is.
I'm not so sure it's not a critical area. but
Okay.
We'd have to check into that.
Yeah, we have to check into it, but that might be one option to look at.
Could we use TIF revenue for something like that?
Parking fact, I would imagine, again, it would be, finding the space, and I would imagine typically I call them dog runs or dog parks, they're fenced.
Off-leash dog park. Off-leash is the
Off-leash dog
operative.
park.
Mhm.
And so it'd have to be fenced, there would be a maintenance component to that. Yeah, so,
See, you can use park impact fees for anything that increases capacity. It would.
yeah.
Another suggestion, since we're talking about dog parks, whether it be in the near future or distant future, since we're making some revisions to the code, I know there's a section of the code with exceptions, such as dogs in training, I believe it says, and police dogs and
Yep.
so forth. Perhaps we could add dogs in designated dog parks, but add that now, so we don't have to go back and
Yep.
revise the code at some future point.
Yeah.
Good thought, Doug.
It's another one of those, urbanization, gradual urbanization of the city of the center. Once you have a leash law, the next thing you need to have is an off-leash dog park. And in terms of maintenance, I mean, if you've ever seen these things, grass cutting is not an issue. It's usually dirt, bare dirt is how, if it's used. And it's fenced in, and they've got these little turnstiles, so when you go in there, as people come and go, the dogs don't get out. So they are very, very popular.
Well, the one in Ridgefield has like a sally port on it, and it's not very well maintained. I actually complained about it one day because my dog got out, worked her way out of it. And she's not that, Bella's 60 pounds, but she managed to bully through it. So the latch on it wasn't adequate. Whatever we put up, we need to protect it so that people turn their animals loose in there. We guarantee that they'll, or hopefully guarantee they'll stay in there.
Yeah. So, well, this, in my mind anyway, is a separate issue from
Yeah.
the leash law and what we've actually have here that we're discussing tonight, but that's something that the city can continue to look into. And we'll keep that as a separate agenda item if that's okay.
Mayor, something
Revisit
too,
that.
if you have a conversation with Eric, our planner, when we have new developers coming in and there's medium density housing in there, those people have animals. That might be something that they can incorporate with some of their odd shaped pieces of land as well.
Yeah, that has been discussed on a
Yeah.
couple of the proposed developments right now, so, but, yeah, they get a little bit more area specific. But anyway, that's a good conversation, I think it's a good topic, it's something that I'm sure we'll be hearing more about going forward, but I really don't want to hold up the leash law and the existing ordinance by encumbering it with this other.
Oh, no.
Okay.
But the part about getting that in there, that dogs can be off leash in an off leash park, I think that's a good catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't I include these things that you're mentioning, revise this, integrate it with the other parts of this chapter, and send it back out to you before the end of the week for you to look at? Okay.
That work?
Now,
Okay.
traveling, but that's fine.
Are we still in new business?
We're
Is that
still,
what- Are we under new business?
we are under new business, correct?
I'd like to discuss two items to come forward. The McKinsey report on the junction, when are we going to get that? When would that be on the agenda?
That will be on the agenda, I would say sometime in July.
In July?
And the McKinsey report has been completed, but the next step is two of our consultants, Eric Eisman and Paul Lewis, are working on they're going to do an evaluation of that report and there's just a lot of data in that report. It's raw data, and it's really not very easy to draw any conclusions from it. So I've requested that they take a look at it. Paul Lewis is going to kind of look at the methodology that was utilized by McKinsey when they did their actual evaluation of the junction. And they're working on that, and I would say probably sometime in July we'll have that report from them.
And the second item that may be on agenda is the totem pole. It's down. I understand it's damaged when they damaged it some when they took it down. But I'd like to get that on the agenda to take action on it. It was done by grants under Liz's administration, I believe, wasn't it? And, you know, it'd be nice, it needs to dry out real well, but it does need to be maintained.
Right.
If we're gonna ever use it or put it up anywhere.
Yeah,
The proposals from a number of citizens is talking about in the roundabout or at some other place. But either way, it should be, now that it's down, and if it dries out in a few weeks, I think, I would like to get us to authorize some kind of activity going.
Okay.
Some action to get it worked on.
Right.
By somebody.
yeah. So I don't know that it was damaged when it was taken down. The wings on it were damaged before it was taken down. That's what was damaged. So that, I don't think it was damaged when it was removed.
Anyway, it has to be repaired.
But there is some
And it has to
repairs,
be
and it's,
maintained, so.
yeah, and I think it needs, that also needs, somebody needs to look at that. The totem pole's actually in pretty rough shape overall, so I agree with what you're saying. But, yeah, it's right now up at the Public Works building, and yeah, it's being well taken care of, and we'll address that.
Okay.
Okay, but thank you for that. Yeah, the totem pole's taken on its own life for sure,
No pun intended.
but it's in a good spot right now.
Let's have a Facebook page?
The other item is, what is the status of our board out front? Are we gonna do a new board, or?
We're going to do a new board, and it's going to be, we were talking about that a couple of meetings ago. The actual waterfall itself, the waterfall feature, that's wired right now for 110. We need to rewire that and change that to three-phase power. So that whole feature is going to, we're going to have to issue an RFP to actually rework the entire water feature, not just the message board. The current message board, we cannot buy parts for that board anymore, so it's going to be a matter of replacing that entire board. New technology, different ways to program it, so it's going to be expensive. So we have to get an RFP, issue it, come up with a scope and what exactly it is that we want, and Public Works is working on that right now.
Okay.
Look at eBay for parts.
Yeah.
Straight stuff shows up on eBay.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we've had a supplier that's worked with the city, boy, he's done a phenomenal job keeping it going as long as he has, but it's just, yeah.
How old is it?
Boy, I couldn't really,
Isn't
maybe there's no, I don't
doesn't that
know.
require a dial-up computer connection?
Yeah,
That requires a dial-up computer connection to talk to that sign.
yeah,
I mean, that's how old it is.
yeah. So, but that's being worked on.
Okay.
Okay. And then, let's see, we did have a comment this evening. I really didn't get this on the agenda, but I was at the Our Days Committee meeting on Monday, and there was a lot of discussion about having a beer garden this year at Holly Park during the Our Days Festival. You may recall that last July, the city passed an ordinance where we prohibited any use or consumption of alcohol in the city parks and to include the community center. So we did pass the ordinance that the city does not allow that activity to happen. I did mention it to a city attorney briefly. I don't think he's really had a lot of time to look at it, but right now, my thoughts are that the ordinance is probably going to have to be addressed. Am I correct in that?
Well, I just sent off a message to you in chapter 12.25 deals with city parks. Prohibited activities, down there is consumption of alcohol or illegal drugs. But as I'm trying to recall when we amended this came up in the past few years. The preface to that section says, unless allowed in a specific park, at a city-sponsored event, or pursuant to a city-issued park use permit, the following activities are prohibited in all parks. And that's where the alcohol prohibition is. So as I read that, unless there's something more, when we issue a permit for the specific R Day's use of, and it's in the main park, then that permit could specifically authorize and provide the terms. In all these, whenever you're dealing with alcohol use on city property, you can pull in the insurance carrier and get their advice on insurance, because if it's an organized event, those people, those entities are usually able to get the insurance that our insurance carrier wants. That would also provide indemnification for the city.
I think that was part of the problem before, is AWC's insurance had some real problem with it. Because I know Suzanne did a lot of work on it. And we thought we were going down the right path, and all of a sudden we had a roadblock. And that's when this ordinance came around.
What the insurance carrier wants is a big deal usually, but, a lot of cities do it.
We had them in the past,
Yeah.
but they were always sponsored by a local business or an organization that picked up the insurance rider. So it was just a matter of working in tandem to meet what those dollar requirements were.
Yeah, if it's like average moms and dads who are holding a bar mitzvah and they wanted to serve alcohol, usually they can't get the insurance that's required. Only organizations can do that, which our days could, I assume. And the servers have to be trained, and there are a lot of requirements for service of alcohol that they'd have to comply with.
Well, just, from our legal liability perspective, I mean, some kind of indemnification clause would be necessary in the permitting process. Generally, where I've seen it in other cities, it's usually there's a police officer required that has to be, paid for by the usually it's a civic group or whatever. They have to find a police officer. So I don't know what those codes are. It's been a while since I visited those, but if you could look at that to be certain that we're covered in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's a local code thing, and our local code appears to allow it, and I think we put it in last time to, absolutely prohibited unless the city issued permit specifically allows it. So
you think we're covered where we are? I just like to make sure that we indemnify and hold ourselves harmless.
Right, well,
So in
that
case
would be
somebody
required.
coming
but-
to or going from causes a
That's something
problem.
that the participant has to do. We don't do
Right.
that.
Well, the question before you is, does the city code allow it? And it appears to. And subject to those kind of terms.
So the next step would be finding either the business entity or the organization that's going to take on that ownership.
I assume our days can get the insurance rider and have the city listed as added insured.
Well, the Lions Club pays the insurance, or provides the insurance for our name already.
But you'll just want to check with your Lions
But does
group to
Lions-
find out what they want to ask for as far as the dollar liability on the insurance rider.
Right, but I think a permit would be, if we had the insurance and we got a permit from the city,
Right. All I'm saying is talk to them first to get the dollar amount to include in the insurance rider, because you will then have to present that to the city to get the approval.
Well, I'll
for the
check with
permit.
our insurance carrier and see what limits they want for their policy.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the right way. Does the Lions Club insurance cover?
it's Lloyd's of London, so I guess it covers just about anything.
Well, no.
It covers the senior trip too, so.
No, does it exclude serving of alcohol? I'm just asking the question
Yeah,
because
no,
that's
I'll
that's a
look
tough.
into
that's-
it. I'll
So,
look
excuse
into
me, I'm
it.
not even sure the Lions Club's gonna be involved with this, so,
Sure.
I
Okay.
mean, again, what I want to get clarification on is, it sounds like the council would be open to allowing this activity to happen, provided we could issue or acquire the proper permits. Yeah, I'm gonna pass that on to Dan, because it's a little bit different than what he's reading there, but,
It's done in
anyway.
many cities. It's done in many cities.
Right, no,
It's
I
not
get it, but-
uncommon at all.
Okay, so essentially what I'm hearing then is that we should go ahead and work towards getting this sanctioned by the city, if you will, to issue this permit for the R Days beer garden.
In an
What they
expedited
want.
fashion.
Well, it has to be somewhat expedited, but it's not till the end of July, so I think we can get that done.
This year?
Yeah. Okay,
How about your catty people?
Any other discussion on that then? Okay, thank you, council.
Aren't you glad you brought it up?
Yeah, no. There was a lot of discussion about this at the last Our Days Committee meeting, and so, yeah, they want it.
And a gentleman there that has done this many times and
Right.
is in the insurance business.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, the next item on the agenda is an executive session. So we will be going into executive session according to RCW 42.30-110, and we'll be in executive session for roughly 15 minutes, and there will be no decision made. So I'm going to ask everybody to please leave, and the council will go into executive session.
Thank you for coming, folks.
It lasted forever.
Yeah.